You're watching Tornado Facts with Beanrock124, Season 2, Episode 9, or Episode 29. My name is Nathan, and I talk about tornadoes all the time. Now, this tornado outbreak we're talking about today kind of is ironic. It's 1997 Central Texas tornado outbreak. Why is it ironic? Because just 2 days ago, when I'm recording this, there was a tornado outbreak in the Red River Valley, just a little bit north of this area. So about in this area just off the map. I don't even know if ironic was a correct word for describing this tornado outbreak, but whatever. It's my Tornado Facts with Beanrock124 series, so it's going my way. Well, I mean, it has to be my series if it has my channel name. Okay, whatever. So, a deadly tornado outbreak occurred in Central Texas during the afternoon and evening of May 27, 1997, in conjunction with the southwestward moving cluster of supercell thunderstorms. These storms produced 20 tornadoes, mainly along the Interstate 35 corridor from northeast of Waco to north of San Antonio. The strongest tornado was an F5 that leveled parts of Gerald, Texas, killing 27 and injuring 12. Overall, 30 people were killed and another 33 were hospitalized by the severe weather. Although the atmospheric conditions enabling the event were forecast to be conducive for strong winds and large hail, forecasters did not initially anticipate as much of a risk of strong tornadoes due to the lack of substantial wind shear over the region. Instead, the coalescence I think they said that right, of severe weather features, including a cold front, dry line, and a gravity wave, provided locally favorable conditions for rotating thunderstorms and the formation of tornadoes. This peculiar, I cannot say it, evolution led to the unusual southwestward motion of the storms and tornadoes they produced. A tornado watch was first issued at 12:54 p.m. on May 27th for portions of East Texas and western Louisiana. The first tornado touched down at 1:21 p.m. in McLennan County, while the final tornado lifted at 8:23 p.m. later that day in Frio County. The 20 tornadoes collectively inflicted at least $126.6 million in damage, and the F5 Gerald tornado was the outbreak's most powerful and deadliest tornado. It destroyed most of the 38-home Double Creek Estate subdivision west of Gerald, where the most extreme damage occurred. Residences were completely dismantled, swept away, and reduced to a concrete slab. Trees in the area were completely shredded and debarked. Fields were scoured to a depth of 18 inches, foot and a half, and asphalt was torn from roads. Due to the tornado's intensity, the debris was often small size and beyond recognition. There were 4 other tornadoes rated F3 or higher. One F3 tornado moved across Cedar Lake, damaging parts of the business district and numerous homes in nearby neighborhoods. An F4 tornado struck the Lake Travis area and caused one fatality. In addition to the tornadoes, the storms also produced large hail and strong straight-line winds. Kelly Air Force Base in San Antonio recorded a 122-mile-per-hour wind gust. Here's radar imagery of the supercell that produced the Gerald tornado right here. It was moving this way toward San Antonio. Weird, of course. Here's your meteorological synopsis. Oh, great. The severity of this tornado outbreak was predicated on an unusual spatial and temporal alignment of weather features at highly localized scales. The broader environment was not peculiarly anomalous for the late springtime over central and eastern Texas. Unlike conventional outbreaks in Texas, the 1997 outbreak was not associated with the strong trough of low pressure and strong density gradients in the lower troposphere. Instead, the most prominent weather system over the central U.S. at the time was a distant upper-level low centered over central Nebraska, imparting little influence on atmospheric conditions over Texas. Consequently, winds in the mid-levels over the troposphere over Texas on May 27 were weak and westerly, ranging from 30 knots, 35 miles an hour, over North Texas to below 15 knots or 20 miles an hour over Central and South Texas. Winds closer to the surface were also quiescent. The average storm relative winds within the lowest 6 kilometers of the atmosphere, as measured in Del Rio, Texas, prior to the onset of storm development, was only 6 knots or 7 miles an hour. Further aloft, at the level of the jet stream, there were 2 nearby wind speed maxima over northern Mexico and the central Mississippi Valley. This led to the strong divergence of air over Texas. Wind shear was negligible. That was way off. Within the lowest 6 kilometers of the atmosphere, contrary to typical tornado outbreaks. Despite generally meager winds, the atmosphere was nonetheless thermally energetic. The combination of several days of onshore wind flow from the Gulf of Mexico and the persistence of a capping inversion aloft led to an accumulation of moist air over the state. Dew points soon exceeded 70 degrees, with the boundary layer representing ample moisture in the lower levels of the troposphere. Radio sones launched from Corpus Christi and Fort Worth on the morning of May 27 detected the presence of a robust elevated mixed layer of airloft characterized by steep lapse rates with the change of temperature with height near the dry... I'm not going to even say that word. Lapse rate. This contributed to the high Cape values exceeding 5,500 joules per kilogram, which is really high, across most of central and east Texas, denoting a highly and unstable atmosphere. What? In some cases, Cape was as high as 6,500 joules per kilogram. Sheesh. So yeah, I'm surprised only 20 tornadoes touched down on that day. The lack of fronts moving across Texas in the 36 hours before the tornado outbreak allowed this instability to remain and spread across much of the state. Although these conditions were regionally conducive to the development of thunderstorms capable of producing large hail and strong winds, the potential for supercell and tornadic development was not initially clear given the lack of wind shear. Oh, jeez. Other metrics and indices used to diagnose tornado potential, such as the EHI, the Energy Helicity Index, Storm Relative Helicity, Supercell Composite Parameter, and the Significant Tornado Parameter, were also lower than historically observed environments featuring tornadoes. For instance, the amount of storm relative helicity within the lowest 3 kilometers of the atmosphere, a common measure for quantifying the amount of wind shear, was measured at 70 meters squared per second squared, I think. This happened in yesterday's Tornado Facts, or last week's special Tornado Facts Beanrock124 video. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what M squared divided by seconds squared. I think that's what it means. Anyways, it was at Corpus Christi and 117 that, according to data from the Rapid Update Cycle computer model, values over 300 that. I'm just going to say that for this from now on because it's easier. Are correlated with weak tornadoes. A study published by Monthly Weather Review in 2007 described the environment as being marginally favorable for supercells and unfavorable for significant supercellular thunderstorms. There we go. Instead, the factors that enabled the eventual tornado outbreak may have transpired at a mesoscale involving several features becoming how do you pronounce that word? Over Texas. I don't speak gibberish. The dry line delineating the boundary between the moist maritime air mass over East Texas and the drier continental air mass farther west remained nearly stationary in the region on the morning of May 27. On the preceding evening, a mesoscale convective system developing across the dry line over eastern Oklahoma and Arkansas generated a well-defined gravity wave that traveled southwest across East Texas on the morning of May 27th. Its progression was evidenced on satellite imagery as an advancing band of mid-level cumuli. And that's it for that sentence. A weak low-level pressure area also developed along the dry line near Dallas and tracked southwest along the boundary. In the 2 days before May 27, a cold front associated with the upper-level low over Nebraska swept slowly southeast across the central U.S. prior to dawn on May 27th. The front progressed across West Texas by 7 a.m. on May 27. The front spanned from southeastern Oklahoma through the northwestern portion of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, southwestwards to near the Big Bend of Texas. This placed the cold front parallel and just to the west of the dry line along a northeast to southwest orientation. A swath of clear skies emerged between the two boundaries, maximizing surface heating during the daytime and contributing to the weak low-pressure area's southwestward movement through central Texas. That was a handful. Why did I read all that? So here's a satellite loop of the storms that formed that day. You can see, boom, form up. You can see the dry line right there. You can see it right here. When it goes back right there. That's the dry line right there. And they just formed right along it. So that's classic, kind of. Whatever. Around 12:30 p.m., the gravity wave or cold front dry line and low pressure system overlapped near Waco, Texas, with the faster cold front overtaking and merging with the nearly stationary dry line. The cold front and dry line were brought together in a northeast to southwest fashion resembling a zipper. Thunderstorms formed near Waco in tandem with the juxtaposition features and within a local maximum of surface heating and convergence of moist air. While some storms had spawned along the cold front, the gravity wave's passage in the early afternoon hours coincided with the rapid intensification of the first thunderstorms. The arrival of the gravity wave and its perpendicular alignment relative to the orientation of the cold front and dry line may have enhanced wind shear locally, despite weak wind shear at a broader synoptic scale. This allowed thunderstorms to rotate to become supercells. I am not going to read this part because that's kind of what we kind of read there. Okay. The day's first thunderstorm near Waco in McLennan County strengthened quickly in response to the highly unstable atmosphere. A severe thunderstorm warning, the first of the day, was issued for the county at 12:50 p.m. Weather radars showed increasing rotation with the storm, prompting the issuance of a tornado warning at 1:21 p.m. The storm produced the outbreak's first tornado 5 miles southwest of Hewitt near Lorena. The same storm produced a second brief tornado near Bruceville, followed by a third intense F3 tornado in southwestern McLennan County that lasted for 20 minutes. A new thunderstorm developed along the flanking line associated with the first storm. The second storm spawned several tornadoes as it expanded toward the southwest, including an F3 tornado near Lake Belton beginning at 2:25 p.m. and the F5 Gerald tornado beginning at 3:25 p.m. The next radar in Granger used to monitor the storm suffered a power failure and went out of commission at 3:38 p.m. A control switch left in an improper position on a prior maintenance visit prevented its emergency power supply from activating. Thunderstorms developing to the southwest later in the afternoon and evening produced additional tornadoes, including the F3 that struck Cedar Park and the F4 that struck Lakeway. The Lakeway tornado was the first instance of an F4 tornado striking Travis County on record. The final tornado of the day touched down in Frio County and lifted at 7:23 p.m. So why up here did it say 8:23 p.m.? Right? It said 8. Yeah. What if it's a typo? Further, I don't want to read that one. Okay, warnings. The Storm Prediction Center forecasted a moderate risk for severe thunderstorms over parts of East Texas in its severe weather outlook at 1:03 a.m. on May 27th. The moderate risk included Waco, the Killeen, Temple, Fort Hood metro area, and extended southeast toward Shreveport and Fort Polk, Louisiana. Austin was located at the boundary between the moderate risk region and the slight risk region that encompassed most of East and South Texas, including the Hill Country. The Storm Prediction Center predicted that the gravity wave would be a focal point for storms capable of producing large hail and damaging winds given the unstable atmosphere. A subsequent outlook issued by the SPC at 10:16 a.m. continued to indicate a moderate risk for severe weather and mentioned the possibility of isolated and brief tornadoes. Tornado watch was later issued by the SPC at 12:54 p.m. for parts of eastern Texas and western Louisiana, citing the unstable air mass in place over the region. The Dallas, Fort Worth, and the Austin, San Antonio National Weather Service forecast offices also issued bulletins on the morning of May 27, noting the potential for severe weather. However, these early outlooks focused more on the threat of wind and hail rather than tornadoes due to the low wind shear present over the region. Dallas-Fort Worth National Weather Service office ultimately issued 10 tornado warnings and 5 severe thunderstorms warnings between 1 and 5 p.m. The Austin San Antonio office issued 8 tornado warnings with 24 severe thunderstorm warnings, 10 flash flood warnings during the evening of May 27th. 80% of their issued products occurring after 5 p.m. in connection with the widespread storms that developed later in the day, separate from the initial tornadic storms. In one case, media outlets' decision to manually activate the emergency alert system rather than allow weather warnings to automatically trigger it resulted in a 25 to 30 minute delay in the dissemination of a warning. I don't know what that means. Interviews conducted by a Interviews conducted by a NOAA service assessment team found that many watched the approach of tornadoes prior to taking shelter due to their slow movement and high visibility. In the case of the F5 Gerald tornado, some fled while others took shelter. Due to the strength of the tornado, some who stayed behind were killed despite taking appropriate safety measures. Yeah, no thank you. Here's your confirmed tornadoes after like 10 minutes. None unrated: 6F0, 6F1, 3F2, 3F3, 1F4, and 1F5 for a total of 20. Here's the tornadoes. Of course, we'll get to the Gerald one in a second. There's the Cedar Park one. Here's the Lakeway one. And here's Gerald. The Dead Man Walking tornado, and I'm not reading all that. Parts of Gerald, Texas were struck by a powerful F5 tornado on the afternoon of May 27. The tornado destroyed approximately 10% of the homes in Gerald. At the time, the city had a population of about 450 people and had previously been struck by tornadoes in 1987 and 1989. The hardest hit area was the Double Creek Estate subdivision west of downtown Gerald. The Gerald tornado was the first and only known occurrence of an F5 tornado in Williamson County, Texas. It was also the deadliest tornado in Texas since the 1987 Saragossa tornado. May 22nd, 1987. Almost 10 years to the date. In fact, a little bit more than 10 years to the date. The thunderstorm that spawned the Gerald tornado began west of Temple, along the flanking line of another thunderstorm earlier in the afternoon on May 27. The storm produced several tornadoes in Bell County, including the F3 that impacted communities along Lake Belton. Weather radar observed the strengthening mesocyclone within the thunderstorm, with the speed of rotation rising above 40 knots or 45 miles an hour. As the storm moved into Williamson County, it produced two short-lived F2 tornadoes north of Gerald at 3:25 and 3:35 p.m. The latter of the two was a multi-vortex tornado that lifted 4 minutes later. The Austin-San Antonio National Weather Service Forecast Office issued a tornado warning for Williamson County at 3:30 p.m. In response to the storm's approach, the warning was put into effect for 1 hour. This was the first tornado warning of the day issued for the office's warning area and warned that the city of Gerald is in the path of this storm. Local warning sirens went off about 10 to 12 minutes before the tornado struck. The precise start of the tornado was difficult to pinpoint. The most prominent and destructive part of the tornado's evolution was preceded by the apparition of short-lived and small rope-like funnels. These may have been separate tornadoes or simply an earlier part of the Gerald tornado's evolution. An aerial survey conducted by the Birmingham, Alabama office for the National Weather Service included the damage caused by the earlier F2 tornadoes, mostly to trees and roads, as part of the overall tornado path. Some reports also include the F1 tornado near Prairie Dale as an earlier continuation of the Gerald tornado. The final unambiguous apparition of the Gerald tornado began as a narrow and rope-like funnel when it touched down at 3:40 p.m. just within Williamson County line, 3 miles north of Gerald. Like the two F3s earlier in the day, it developed along the gust front produced by its parent thunderstorm. This mechanism is typical of tornado genesis. Not associated with supercell thunderstorms. Traffic along I-35 came to a stop as the tornado descended nearby. As the Texas Highway Patrol also stopped traffic on both sides of the interstate under the expectation that the tornado would cross the highway, it ultimately moved parallel to I-35. Tracking south-southwest, the tornado quickly intensified and grew to a half-mile wide in width, changing from its initial thin and white appearance to a blue and black color. At this time, it became the dead man walking tornado. F5 tornado damage was identified early in the tornado's path. Its intense winds scoured the ground and stripped pavement from roads. The tornado tore 525 feet of asphalt as it crossed county roads 308, 305, and 307. The thickness of the asphalt pavement was roughly 0.8 of an inch thick. A culvert plant at the corner of county roads 305 and 307 collapsed. Nearby, a similar plant and mobile home sustained some damage, with the latter struck by a 2x4 piece of lumber. The occupants of a mobile home 500 feet north-northwest of the culvert plant fled to a frame house that the tornado later struck. The evacuees were killed while the mobile home only sustained minor damage. Are you kidding me? So you're saying if you're in a house, like a normal house that's supposed to withstand the winds, you get killed from it, while if you stayed in your mobile home, you would have survived? Don't take that as a sign that mobile homes are safe. They're still not safe, regardless of what the tornado does. The tornado slowly entered the Double Creek Estate subdivision, where it exacted its most catastrophic impacts. Concurrently, the tornado expanded further to a maximum width of 3/4 of a mile wide. Eyewitnesses indicated that the tornado's movement slowed to about 5 to 10 miles an hour as it entered the neighborhood. This may have contributed to the resulting extreme destruction. The tornado first destroyed the first home in Canada on the northwest corner of the subdivision. A clock recovered from the remaining debris was stopped at 3:48 p.m., presumably marking the time the tornado entered the community. Ooh, that's kind of creepy. Much of the neighborhood was leveled and reduced to small and unrecognizable debris, with the resulting rubble lacking any large items. The granularity of the debris was indicative of the sheer strength of the twister. Due to the tornado's slow movement, homes near the center of its path experienced tornadic winds for approximately 3 minutes. The mostly wooden-framed residences were completely removed from their foundations, leaving behind cement slab foundations swept clear of wreckage. In some cases, parts of the foundation themselves were extruded, including the sill plates that connected the wood frame homes to the foundations. Portions of the remaining rubble were dispersed miles away. The ground was left scoured and littered with debris across Double Creek Estates. In some cases, the ground was scoured out to a depth of 1.5 inches deep. 1.5 inches deep. That makes complete sense. Vehicles in the neighborhood were tossed and mangled beyond recognition. At least six were found flattened in open areas and coated with mud and grass. Some were thrown as far as a half-mile away. Trees in the neighborhood were completely denuded of their bark. All 27 fatalities associated with the tornado occurred in this neighborhood, which at the time consisted of 131 residents living in 38 single-family homes and several mobile homes. Bodily remains were later found at 30 locations. Ugh. Most of the deaths were attributed in the morbidity and mortality weekly report to multiple trauma, though one death was attributed to asphyxia. The high intensity of the Gerald tornado left those in its path with little resource. Most homes in Double Creek Estates were built on cement slab foundations, and a few had a basement or any form of storm shelter. 19 people sought refuge in a single storm shelter, actually. Wow. Some residences who followed prescribed safety measures nonetheless perished. One survivor holed up in a bathtub and was flung several hundred feet from her house onto a road. Ooh. The walls of some homes on the main side of the tornado path remained intact. Periphery, I believe that's opposite, protecting some of those who survived the tornado. Others chose to evacuate ahead of the approaching tornado. 40 structures were obliterated in Double Creek Estates. 3 businesses adjacent to the neighborhood were destroyed. In total, the tornado dealt $10 to $20 million in damage to the neighborhood. Around 300 cattle grazing in a nearby pasture were killed, and some were found a quarter-mile away. Hundreds of cattle were also dismembered, and a few cows were also skinned by the tornado. Ooh. The tornado turned slightly to the south-southwest after traversing through the neighborhood. The damage in these outlying areas was somewhat scattershot. In one case, a mobile home suffered only minor damage, while the adjacent house lost half of its roof. Remember, mobile homes are still not safe regardless of that. Metal buildings were unroofed across County Road 305 just south of Gerald. The road's guardrail was impaled by a wooden plank thrown by the strong winds. I think I've seen that picture before. The tornado then again crossed County Road 305 and entered a forest of cedar trees. Some of the damage to the trees suggested that the tornado may have been a multi-vortex tornado. Again, dead man walking. The path of damage left behind by the tornado ended abruptly shortly after entering this forested area, while the National Centers for Environmental Information indicating that it lifted at 3:53 p.m. after remaining on the ground for 13 minutes and 5.1 miles. Other government accounts of the tornado list a total path length of 7.6 miles after incorporating the preceding tornadoes north of Gerald and near Prairiedale. Between May 29 and June 1, the Office of the Federal Coordinator for Meteorological Services and Supporting Research carried out aerial and ground surveys of the tornadic damage in Texas in coordination with the Texas Wing Civil Air Patrol. The Gerald tornado was classified as F5 severity throughout most of the tornado's path. However, a critique of the Fujita scale, published by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, suggested that winds between 158 to 206 miles an hour, corresponding to an F3 on the scale, were sufficient to explain the damage brought by the tornado. The critique noted that the homes at Double Creek Estates, although built within the preceding 15 years, exhibited structural weakness in their design as the lack of anchor bolts and steel straps in their foundations. Approximately $40 million approximately $40 million in damage was inflicted upon property, with another $100,000 inflicted upon crops. 12 people were injured by the storm, in addition to the 27 killed. Due to the unusual southwestward motion of the thunderstorm that caused the tornado, the sequence of weather events experienced by those affected was in the opposite order of typical tornadic events. The tornado arrived first, followed by the hail, wind, and rain of the parent thunderstorm. Despite the violence of the tornado in the presence of its associated mesocyclone aloft, the thunderstorm did not exhibit a distinct hook echo on weather radar typically associated with such tornadoes. This may have also been caused by the unusual motion of the thunderstorm, resulting in the tornado's placement in a atypical position relative to the thunderstorm's motion. I said I wouldn't read all that, yet I still did. Okay. You can read this part for yourself, because I'm actually getting tired of reading, because I read all that. And then here's your non-tornadic effects here. I can't fit everything in. There, good enough. So, that is it for Season 2, Episode 9 of Tornado Facts with Beanrock124. This one being about the 1997 Central Texas tornado outbreak on May 27, 1987. I don't know, this one may be longer than the Tri-State tornado, even though this one seemed like it had less information. I'm not sure. So, goodbye.